Kaizen events can be great. They also have a couple of pitfalls that I really want you to be aware of. Hello, I'm Tom. Welcome to my channel where we make operational excellence practical. And today we'll dive into one of the favorite sort of lean tools, the Kaizen event. Specifically that sort of 1 week Kaizen event that is a pretty popular and honestly a strong tool to have in your toolbox. But there are a few pitfalls. Well, I'll be discussing one major pitfall basically of the Kaizen event, and that is all around its timing, right? Basically the strongest thing it has, short time frame, high intensity, can also lead you to a couple of quite serious problems if you don't take these pitfalls into account. Now, in a previous video, I have been discussing that a Kaizen event is especially very good when you are talking about, let's say, organizational, service-based, maybe working between departments-based problems, where the solution can most likely be found in how do we work together, how do we set up things together, and not so much in something like we have to redesign a production line, right? So for manufacturing, you always have to be a little careful with these Kaizen events, because for the problems you have sort of at the line, it may not be your best tool, while for the problems you may have in your business processes, in your office, super, can really work. So what do I mean? Maybe based on this you have already sort of guessed it, but there's a couple of things you really need to take into account in any problem solving or sort of problem removal improvement team. And those are that, when we go through these phases, when you identify the problem or a very specific project, then you analyze it and you develop the solution, the countermeasures, then you implement those solutions, you check, validate, does it really work? Is it just working because we are here right now, or is this really a solution? Didn't we create other stuff? And then you really want to make sure that it gets standardized in such a way that daily practices, daily control, the daily things we do, they pick up these countermeasures, these improvements. The stuff we implemented stays implemented. Right, so when we look at that, there is this pretty big thing. See, when we identify the problem, that actually leads to who's on the team. And the thing is, when we plan people out for an entire week in a Kaizen event, that sort of needs to be done in advance, right? Most people don't really like to hear on Monday, 11 o'clock-ish, oh, by the way, Fred, your week just got planned out. Like, what? But, that doesn't fit in my agenda. Of course it doesn't. The other way around, right? You identified somebody who you want to have in your Kaizen event, and by 11 o'clock that first morning, or maybe slightly later, by 2 o'clock that same afternoon, they find out that they basically have nothing to do with this problem. They're not going to be part of the solution. They're not going to be a key part of analyzing what goes wrong or defining how we're going to work against it. Are you going to keep them the rest of the week? Probably not. Now, I know you've got plenty of email, you'll be happy to have your week back, but you probably moved a lot of stuff from your plan to free up that week. Really not good. So, that after you identify what really is the problem, you make another revision of who really is or should be on the team, that is potentially quite a big problem. Now, this doesn't always happen, but still, that means that the identification of your problem, and we're not even per se talking about a very specific definition, but a good idea of what the problem is, what we're going to be touching, which parts of our process are involved. You need to do that in advance, right? Before the event. So, yes, of course, the actual definition of what do we really see happening is something you want to do with a group, is something you also definitely want everybody in the event to participate in for their own learning and understanding, and so that you all have, let's say, the noses pointing into the same direction. Everybody has the same idea on what are we going to be solving. So the definition, yes, but make sure that you prepare your Kaizen event. Prepare it in a way so that you basically get a pretty good idea of what the problem is and where it's sort of coming from, hopefully. Because that allows you to have the correct team on board for your full day. It can be done in a full day, 3 day, 5 day, like a whole week, problem solving in a Kaizen event. Then the analysis, the development of the countermeasures. Of course, there are pitfalls, there are things you have to take into account, but on this sort of planning scale, the main topic of this video, not too much of a problem. In fact, I really agree that having this sort of pressure cooker environment where you say, we're going to be really getting to the bottom of this problem, and we've got the resources, we've got the management involvement as well, we can do our tests, great. The only thing, but this really is the type of problem you want to attack or not, is that some type of problems, they just require you to do trials. They require you to do comparison of a number of batches of production and stuff like that. So especially in manufacturing, if you're more in new product development or problems with the product formulation or the settings of the machine and stuff like that, there is a good chance you will not be able to do this in the limited time frame. Right? The total time of about 40 hours of work may be more than sufficient, but you need the production runs, you need the field test of a product or whatever, right? If you have that type of problem, don't try to do it in a week, won't work. But usually that part is sort of okay. But then we get to, and this is partially problem type based, but also definitely based on what type of improvements, countermeasures, changes can we reasonably do. This whole part here, that whole part is super time sensitive, right? So some solutions can be easily implemented, other solutions they just take time to put in place. Also in those business processes, about which I say, well, usually you can really do this in a nice Kaizen event. If a business process, the good solution is to actually fully implement a nice piece of software, and not just about the software, but the procedures that go with this software, with the flow, getting everybody's data together. That happens a lot, that type of solution. It's basically impossible to implement that within the few days you have for this, right? Because that's about a half a day or a day. Then here we're spending a day or 2, 3, right? So that's a bit the thing. You've got a day to implement stuff. Many solutions will not fit. Try to get it on the page. So they need longer implementation, they need longer to implement. The solution can still be really good, but it won't fit into your week. And before we go to the solution for this non-solution, let's also get that same thing on specifically the standardizing part, because that part is super important if you want to do operational excellence, continuous improvement, if you want to make sure that you transfer your learnings into standards that your daily operation uses, which is the core of what we do in continuous improvement. You need to standardize, but this standardization part is never urgent. Now, it's important. You need to do it. On Monday morning, the top brass will say, we're going to do this. We're going to go all the way to the end. We're going to make sure it's standardized. We're going to make sure that we sustain our changes. Of course, they also know that, and they always will tell it. But by the time you get here, it's no longer that urgent. Right? And especially in this setting of a nice pressure cooker Kaizen event, where you totally cleared out your calendars. You're all together, all the people that you need to really sort of make the decisions, to really get the commitment of everybody involved, everybody that is needed to get the yes. They're all in the room. But that's sort of making this potential problem worse. Because the reason you had to all clear out their calendars is probably because they're not really getting consensus if you're not putting them in the same room, or it's not really getting the attention it needs or the resources it needs. So if we say, and because you of course you see the solution, right? This becomes quite a clear action list. So you define, you identify, and then you define your problem, you really do the analysis together, you develop the countermeasures together, you get the commitment, and then the implementation becomes a project, it becomes an action list. For whom? Right? Who's gonna do that? Who's gonna supply the resources? Who's going to be freeing people up for training afterwards? Even if you are going for one of the software packages that then also needs a procedural change, we're going to do different operational procedures, we're going to be doing a couple of different ways of communicating, and everybody's got to be trained, we'll be installing a few clients here and there on computers or completely new terminals, all the things. Is that going to be the whole team? Probably not. None of the people you selected for this were too busy to normally get their focus on it. So there is a large pitfall. Now, I'm not saying this always goes wrong, but I am saying that I see this go wrong a little bit too often. So set this up right from the beginning. You need to have a very strong follow-up structure with those key managers who also support the Kaizen event process, with very clear, these are the actions, these are the responsibilities, this is where we're going to follow it up. This has to come back into your management meetings afterwards. And then it can definitely work. So I'm not against Kaizen events. In fact, I love them. They're good. They can force a good thinking about a problem, really getting to the causes together, and then implementing, or at least getting that very strong commitment to certain solutions. That is what you want. But know that the implementation phase and implementation and onwards, for many problems, it will be outside of your pressure cooker week. And that is okay, but the rules of the game have changed after Friday, so to say. The people are not in that same meeting room together the whole day with their mind on this problem. Even that is difficult enough because they'll bring their laptops and they'll get lots of calls and emails anyway, but at least you have everybody together and focused. Come next Monday, the people who are in your team, they will be sort of doing double duty on their email because they had to sort of ignore it last week, and you're losing your momentum if you don't plan this in a very strong, correct way. So, my advice, when you go for Kaizen events, the first thing you do is you select the type of problems where you can already identify it. So where is the problem and where is the solution sort of going to be? You do that then for solutions where it's more the business processes. There's a very good candidate, but the main identifier, the differentiating factor of what you can do successfully in a Kaizen event is where it is important to get the commitment. So if that is sort of your main underlying organizational problem, that the different departments, the different stakeholders, they don't really agree on what the problem is, definitely don't agree on what the causes and the root causes are, and so they're not okaying any solution right now yet because they just speak a different language. Those are great for Kaizen events. When by the end of the event, your target is to have an implementation plan, then you're great, you're golden, right? So if you have the plan to implement as your goal, and you know you have very strong follow-up, that's a great situation. because now you can overachieve by implementing it. So if you see that it is a relatively simple standard operating procedure change, just the way we work, the way we communicate, where we put responsibility for a certain task, or just what is the response to a certain situation happening, then you can actually get that all implemented. Maybe check, maybe not, but already into your standardization. You can do that within a couple of days, within a week. And that's great, right? If that was a point of contention among colleagues, departments, different stakeholders, super. But the chance is super big that to really do the implementation, you need more time. Plan for that. When you do a Kaizen event and you think, oh, we're going to start and end within a week, you're setting yourself up for failure. You need to prep. What type of problem is it? Which processes do we sort of touch? So where are my stakeholders? Where are my people that can affect, or at least help analyze, help solve the problem? To know that, you need to know the problem and sort of the mechanisms. You do a pre-study. And because the chance is so big that your solutions, and therefore the checking, the validation, and the standardization will not fit within your week, you need to have the follow-up structure very strongly in place. If you have a CI department and you have some resources, and you're basically okay implementing a solution, if it is at least okayed, super, right? Then these events are your friend, because it does allow you to get the decision makers into the room and to agree on that implementation. Right? And then you can do it. But if you need the resources to also do the implementation, be careful with this. If you need time to do the analysis because you have to do product trials, this is not your tool. But I'm not saying it's a bad tool. I'm actually saying it's a very good tool, but not for every problem. And if you do it, be careful of especially the time constraints in the later part. Now, if you do take that into account, I am sure you are really going to be helping your organization with Kaizen events. So I wish you the best of luck with that. If you have any questions on Kaizen events, how to organize it, maybe just want to brainstorm something, get into contact with me, write a question in the comments. But for now, I think with this pitfall clearly on your scope, you will be set up for way more success. Don't forget to hit that like button and now get yourself a problem to solve for your organization to become better. And as always, don't forget to also enjoy the continuous improvement journey.